Hello everyone, it's Pen Productions here, back with another movie roundup. This time it's for March. You got that from the title, but I figured I'd say it anyway, because I haven't written the title yet. In case you're new here, or you just haven't caught one of my movie roundups yet, basically what happens is I watch a new movie every week, put a review on Letterboxd, and at the end of each month I round up all the movies I've watched, and I talk about them a little bit, maybe a little more in depth than I did in my reviews, compare and contrast a little bit, and make a video out of it. And that's where you are right now, sitting here watching this video. If you need to take a second to question your life choices, go ahead, hit the pause button. I'll be here waiting for you. As for the movies themselves, I watched The Perks of Being a Wallflower, Lady Bird, Emma, and Quartet. If you want to skip around or jump ahead to different movies, make sure to check the description where there will be timestamps for each section of the video. Also, keep in mind, I am talking about the movies some more, so I'm going to throw out a blanket spoiler warning for all 4 of these movies, and also maybe possibly some of the movies I've watched already this year, which you can check out in the movie roundups, which are also in the description below, as well as on Letterboxd, which is also in the description below. God, I need to script this. First up is The Perks of Being a Wallflower. This movie's about Logan Lerman going through high school with the help of Emma Watson and Ezra Miller. And they all have their own shit going on with different levels of severity, and they're just trying to survive and thrive and learn to love themselves. If you've seen any of my previous movie roundups, you'll know that I've watched a different type of movie every week, essentially, and I got tired of it pretty quick. So this month I definitely wanted to sit down and pick a subject and watch multiple movies based on that subject. And I succeeded in 2 different levels, and we'll get into that later on in the video. But the first thing that came across for me was the coming of age thing, and that worked out really well because I just wanted to watch one of those anyway, and I decided I was going to watch Lady Bird, which, is coming next. But when I looked up Lady Bird, I noticed that this movie was right next to it on the search results for Netflix. And I was like, you know what? I've seen this movie in the Redbox 20,000 times. And I looked it up and found out that, oh shit, I just know all of these actors. And I kind of want to see this now. So I watched that one instead. And then watched Lady Bird later. Again. Coming up. It's coming soon. Check it out. So yeah, I really liked this movie. It has some dark stuff in there, some surprising things, like the Aunt Helen plotline. Basically, his aunt abused him and then died, and then he felt guilty because he wanted her to die because she was abusing him. That kind of hangs over him for the entire movie, although it's not even properly addressed until the end, and I thought that was a really cool choice to have him kind of seem oh yeah, he's overcoming all these challenges of high school and that's essentially it, but then it turns around as oh no, that he had other shit going on. You knew he had other shit going on, but it felt like it was addressed in the movie, and then at the end it just twists on a dime, and then all of a sudden, oh wow, he's in a mental hospital because he did some things, and people were worried about him because of this thing that happened that he still can't quite process. So I don't know, I think that was handled pretty well, all things considered. Moving on to something a little bit lighter, I enjoyed seeing all 3 of the main actors in dramatic roles. Logan Lerman I only knew from the Percy Jackson movies, so it was good to see him in a good movie. Emma Watson was obviously in Harry Potter, and that was a big deal that she was in Harry Potter because those movies were huge. And also Ezra Miller plays the Flash in the Justice League movies. I say movies because there's 2 of the same Justice League movie now. So all in all, I thoroughly enjoyed this film. It spoke to me emotionally, and that's something that I really like when movies do, so I gave it a 5 out of 5. Up next, we have Lady Bird, which shouldn't be a surprise if you watch the last section, because I only mentioned it like 5 or 6 times. Lady Bird is about a girl who's in high school. You can start to see the similarities here. She's learning to live and express herself. But this one's a little different because it has a very prominent home life feature as well. It shows her dealing with her parents, specifically her mother, and how that works because their relationship isn't great. I chose this movie because I wanted to watch a coming-of-age movie, and I was like, oh, I'll just pick this one because it's on Netflix and that was easier for me. And I'm glad I did, because I liked it. The thing about this movie is it's very small. The things that it's portraying are just very, like, subtle and minuscule. It shines brightest in its moments as opposed to its scenes. There's a scene where Lady Bird has a confrontation with her ex-boyfriend who she caught kissing another boy, and basically he comes to talk to her and they have a little bit of a spat, and then he just breaks down crying because he's gay in the early 2000s, and that's tough. So then she ends up comforting him, and it's a really, really nice moment. So stuff like that is kind of where this movie lives, you know? It's kind of in the pocket when it's dealing with really small issues, and it kind of magnifies them a little bit, but not in a way that, like, makes a mountain out of a molehill or anything. It shows all these different scenes of growing up and dealing with high school and cliques and parents that you have a bad relationship with but still care about. What it's like to live in one place and want to live in another, feeling trapped where you've grown up, and also a nice little tasty feature of suburban politics post 9/11. I just thought that was a nice, well, not a nice touch, but you know, it added to the movie. So all in all, again, this was a very good movie. I liked it a lot. I gave this one a 4.5 out of 5. There wasn't particularly a reason for me to not give it a 5 out of 5. There wasn't anything that I didn't actually like that would have brought the score down. But also, it just didn't feel like the same caliber as The Perks of Being a Wallflower. I strongly related to that movie, and I didn't strongly relate to this movie. It's a very good movie. I liked it a lot. But I don't think it had that pathos that Perks of Being a Wallflower did. So having watched them back to back, and having given that one 5, I felt like I couldn't also give this one a 5, so I gave it a 4.5. I was convinced to watch Emma entirely based on 2 things. 1, it was nominated for a couple of Oscars this year, and 2, it starred Anya Taylor-Joy, who I absolutely loved in The Queen's Gambit and wanted to see more of. So, once I came across this movie, I was like, well, I'm just gonna watch that this week, and I watched it that week. Emma is an adaptation of a Jane Austen novel about a rich girl who tries to play matchmaker with her friends, and her naivety kind of gets her into trouble. But everything works out okay in the end because. So, yet again, I liked this movie. Anya Taylor-Joy was great in it because it's Anya Taylor-Joy. I wasn't really surprised by that. I liked Johnny Flynn. He played her, I guess, sparring partner, and they end up getting together at the end of the movie. I thought he was really good. I liked his character. I liked the performance. I liked that he was a musician, both in the movie and in real life. That was a neat piece of information that I found out afterwards. He also sang the end credits song, so that was pretty cool. I think he also wrote it. I think that's a thing that happened. I could be wrong, don't quote me on it, But moving on to the music, it was kind of a huge deal in this movie. A lot of the main characters actually performed music in the movie, most prominently Emma and one of her rivals whose name escapes me were both pianists. One was more accomplished than the other, and the other was Emma. It was kind of funny because, like, she played pretty well, and everyone was talking about how great she was, and then her rival went up and just absolutely shredded. Even outside of that, the actual like score slash soundtrack itself was very prominent in the mix of the movie. You were always aware of the presence of music. It made itself known. One thing I found really interesting, I mentioned this in my review, but I want to go into it a little more here, is that it was heavily inspired by folk music. Not as in like the Bob Dylan kind of folk music, but more of the traditional folk music. And that was interesting because the movie mostly focused on rich people. I might be the only asshole that doesn't associate rich people with folk music, but I don't. I just don't. It doesn't really mix for me. Specifically, something that I noticed was that the music was like, out of tune is the wrong term, but like it felt like it was being performed like in the movie almost. It didn't feel like there was this like fine, precise recording session. It felt like, oh yeah, Johnny and his cousin are gonna do a duet right now, and they're good. They're not the best in the world, but they're good, and we can afford them, and that's what it's gonna be. Johnny and his cousin did a great job. The music sounds beautiful. It's interesting that the composer decided to incorporate music that's not perfect. I'm getting too technical with the music stuff. I'm gonna stop that. Just take my word for it. It's a little funky, and it's better off for it. After I watched this movie, I decided to go take a look at the Wikipedia page for it, and this mentioned that it was a satire on like class and social status, and like maybe the book is, but this movie isn't. It's entirely possible that I just missed everything. And there were a couple of scenes where like it was rich people looking at rich stuff, and it was just like, oh, they're very rich, so they have very rich stuff. But I don't know, it definitely didn't feel like the focus of the movie. It kind of just felt more like a straightforward tale of like this girl growing up and learning that she can't just play games with other people's lives. And yeah, it was very whimsical about it. I wouldn't call it a very serious movie, and I don't think it should be either. But I wouldn't call it a satire. Again, maybe I just missed it. Maybe I'm just bad at watching movies, but I didn't see that as a prominent theme in the movie at all. But I had a good time with this movie. I enjoyed it. It was a fun time. 4 out of 5 stars. I recommend it. Being in a musical mood after I watched Emma, I decided I was going to sit down and watch Quartet, which is a movie I came across on Netflix some time ago about musicians being old, and it was good. One thing I noticed about this movie throughout and much more afterwards is that it definitely was structured like a play, and that's because it's an adaptation of a play, so that makes sense. It could have been a little more of a movie and a little less of a play. It just felt like scene, 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 scene. I didn't like feel as if it was flowing. According to my Lord and Savior, Wikipedia, this film is a comedy drama, or a dramedy, if you will. I know I didn't come up with that myself, and I keep playing it off like it's my own joke. But please just let me have this one. I've never been original in my entire life. I definitely felt like there were scenes of drama and scenes of comedy as opposed to like a mixture of the two of them. And that was essentially divided by like the 4 characters as well. Maggie Smith and Tom Courtenay were kind of the dramatic aspect, and Billy Connolly and Pauline Collins were the comedic part of it. This movie shone the most when it was in its small, intimate, dramatic moments, more than the comedy part of it. I'll take the scene where Maggie Smith has to talk Pauline Collins into not leaving right before their performance because she's in a delusional state of thinking she has to go meet someone, over all of the multiple times that Billy Connolly tried to seduce a 40-year-old nurse any day of the week. It worked better when it was focusing on characters and how they're dealing with the situation that they're in, which is being old in an industry that doesn't really appreciate old people. But it was still a good time. The performances were great. Obviously, it's about musicians, so there was plenty of music for me to enjoy. So I had a good time with it. I also gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. So this month we have a lot to compare between these movies. First of all, the intentional one was that Perks of Being a Wallflower and Lady Bird are both coming-of-age stories, And in a kind of sort of way, Emma is too, but that's not like the focus of the movie. But mostly Perks and Ladybird are telling the story of someone who's in a crossroads of their life and dealing with high school. Obviously, it's a little different what their situations are. In Perks of Being Wallflower, it's a boy entering high school, and in Ladybird, it's a girl leaving high school, and they have their own situations to deal with. Perks of Being Wallflower kind of wraps up nicely. Ladybird doesn't. It kind of definitely has closure, but it's a bit of a tenuous sort of closure, because it doesn't really resolve any of the ideas that it presents, because it's not trying to do that. It's trying to just show life, and life doesn't have closure in the same way that a good story does. So Perks, being a good story, has some pretty decent closure, whereas Ladybird doesn't. Another thing before I get into the big one for similarities is between Perks of Being Wallflower and Emma, which are both novel adaptations. I talked about that in the Emma review. I did not talk about that in the Perks of Being Wallflower review, but they are both adaptations of books. I've not read either of those books, so that's all I'm going to say about that. Also, Quartet is also an adaptation, but it's of a play. So they're kind of connected a little bit, kind of, maybe, sort of. However, the big similarity that all four of these movies have in common is the theme of age. Now, the characters are all at different ages in their lives in these four movies. Perks of Being a Wallflower mostly focuses on a freshman in high school. Ladybird focuses on a senior in high school going into college. Emma doesn't deal with school at all, but it is definitely a young woman who is growing up to become more of an adult, I guess. She already is an adult, but like she's dealing with stuff like marriage and taking care of her father, who is aging, which brings us back to the age thing. Oh my god. And of course, Quartet is about four people who are elderly, dealing with the loss of their youth. And all four of these movies properly teach these characters how to grow into the next stage of their life. I think this is most apparent in obviously the coming of age stories, because that's literally like their point, is to show that. But also in Quartet, that's one of the main like big themes, is that, oh, these people are not in their prime anymore, and like the thing that they do, being music, kind of depends on you being in your prime to make money, to have people like you, and to feel confident in your abilities. I think Quartet kind of has the best message in response to that theme. It kind of presents Maggie Smith's character as like what society thinks of this. She just stops singing because she's too old. She can't do it anymore, and she shouldn't do it anymore, because that's not what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to retire and go to a home, and that's it. But she goes to a retirement home for musicians where they're still playing, practicing, rehearsing, performing, all that stuff. They're still doing music things. Are they good anymore? You take some and you leave some, obviously, but they're still doing what they love because it's what they love. And that's something that she has to learn throughout the movie, is to be able to say, okay, well, my prime happened, it ain't here anymore, I'm long past it, but that doesn't mean I have to give up anymore. And I really liked that theme, again, as a musician, that spoke to me pretty well. Now it's time to wind down a little bit, so I'm gonna bring out the rank book again to show you guys where all these movies place. At number 3, we have Perks of Being a Wallflower. At number 5, we have Ladybird. Number 9, we have Emma. At number 10, we have Quartet. Interestingly enough, this is the first movie roundup where being in the top 10 is a significant achievement, considering that there is more than 10 places. And all 4 of these movies are currently in the top 10. 2 of them just barely, but that's not the point. Keep in mind, the rank book is predominantly based on score, but since I'm doing a scoring system that only has up to 10 points to it, I've ranked the ones that have the same amount of score based on how much I liked them. And that's that. That's the movie roundup. Round it up. If you liked this, check out the other movie roundups that I did if you haven't already seen them. If you have already seen them and you're not subscribed yet, make sure you subscribe, because because that's going to help me a lot to make more of these. If you liked the video, make sure you like it. Let me know in the comments if you've seen any of these movies, or if you want to see any of these movies, or if you have any movies that you've seen that you want to talk about that I haven't talked about. Feel free to just write it all out for me. I'd love to see it. Make sure you check out the description for all the links that I've talked about in this video, including Letterboxd. Is it just Letterboxd? Check out my Letterboxd and all the other links in the description to all the other things that I do if you want to help support the channel a little bit more. I appreciate y'all. Thanks for stopping by. Have a lovely day. Bye. If you're new here, or you just haven't caught one of my movie roundups yet, basically what happens is I watch a new movie every week. Ah!